I don't talk about this night much, but it stuck with me for years. I grew up in a small 2-story house on the edge of town. For most of my childhood, my older brother and I shared a single bedroom, 2 narrow beds on opposite sides, 2 tiny dressers, 2 stuffed closets. It wasn't unbearable, but it was far from roomy. When he left for college, the first thing I did was drag his bed out of there and claim the extra space. With his blessing, of course. I finally had enough room to put in a desk, so I didn't have to do homework at the kitchen table or in my dad's office anymore. For a few years, it felt like my own small kingdom. Then, after I graduated, everything flipped. My brother found a job back in our hometown and moved back into my parents' house. Naturally, he reclaimed our old room that I'd spent months reorganizing. At first, I was irritated, but my parents reminded me that I had done the exact same thing to him years earlier. They weren't wrong. So I just swallowed it. The only spare space left for me was the guest room upstairs, half the size of my old one, perched at the far end of the hall next to my dad's office. It sat directly above the garage, which meant every time someone hit the opener, the whole floor trembled for a good 10 seconds. 2 windows faced out on different walls, one over the driveway, one toward the neighbor's hedges. Not ideal, but quiet enough when the house was empty. It was in that guest room that it happened. It was a warm Friday evening. My brother was in D.C. for a work seminar, and my parents had gone to our family's lake cabin like they always did on summer weekends. After an exhausting shift, I decided not to go anywhere. Just me, takeout, and a paperback novel. Around 9:30, I was stretched out on my bed, reading in the hush of the house. The quiet was actually nice for a change. Then came the sound. The low mechanical groan of the garage door rising, followed by the familiar trembling under my feet. For a second, my brain didn't register it, just a reflexive someone's home. But then it hit me. No one was supposed to be home. My parents had specifically said they wouldn't be back until Sunday night. My brother wasn't due back until tomorrow afternoon. A jolt of adrenaline went through me. I slipped out of bed and went to the driveway window. In the dark, I could see the garage door open, but I couldn't make out any car or figures. The floodlight hadn't come on. The hair on my arm stood up. I opened the closet, searching frantically until my hands closed around an old aluminum baseball bat from my Little League days. Clutching it, I tiptoed out into the hall. Maybe it was nothing, I told myself. Maybe the garage door had malfunctioned. Maybe my dad had driven back for something and forgotten to text me. But deep down, I didn't believe it. As I reached the top of the stairs, I froze. From below, faint voices drifted up low, urgent, impossible to make out. 2 voices at least. They weren't laughing or calling out. They were rifling through something. Someone was in our house. I dialed 911 with shaking hands, whispered my address, and told the dispatcher what was happening. They told me to stay quiet, stay hidden, don't engage. I tucked the phone into my pocket, but could feel a strange pull to act. My heart was hammering so loud it drowned out their words. Against my better judgment, I crept toward the sound. The voices led me straight to my parents' bedroom. Drawers opening, hangers scraping, the muffled thump of things being tossed aside. They were looking for valuables. I took a deep breath, tightened my grip on the bat, and did something incredibly stupid. I burst in, yelling at the top of my lungs. 2 men whipped around, startled. Both were wearing dark hoodies and gloves. For a moment, they just stared at me, clearly not expecting anyone home, especially not someone charging at them with a bat. That flicker of surprise gave me a rush of courage. I swung at the closer one and clipped his thigh. He cursed and stumbled backward. But the other man lunged at me before I could recover. He tackled me hard enough to knock the wind out of me, and the bat slipped from my hands. He was bigger, stronger. He pinned me easily, his hands clamping around my throat. I clawed at him, gasping, trying to push him off. Over his shoulder, I saw the first man crawling toward us. Something metallic glinting in his hand looked like a knife. That was when I knew I had made a terrible mistake. I wasn't going to scare them off. I was going to die here, on my parents' carpet, for trying to play hero. Everything slowed down. The edges of my vision dimmed then, faint but unmistakable. I heard sirens wailing in the distance. The man choking me glanced toward the window. The first guy hissed something I couldn't catch. In an instant they let go, grabbed my bat, and bolted for the backyard door. The last thing I felt was a blow to the side of my head. Then blackness. I came to with a police officer kneeling beside me, shaking my shoulder. My ears were ringing. My head throbbed, but I was alive. The backyard door stood wide open. The men were gone. The officer told me to stay still in case of a concussion. Paramedics checked me over and wanted to take me to the hospital, but I refused. I gave the cops every detail I could remember. They combed the neighborhood, but it was too late. When my parents got home, they were furious with me for confronting intruders instead of hiding like the dispatcher told me. And they were right. Had I stayed upstairs, the police might have caught them, or at least I wouldn't have ended up on the floor half strangled. They installed a full security system the next day. Cameras, motion lights, sensors, everything. Still, one detail gnawed at me. The garage door. The only way to open it was with a wireless switch my dad had hidden in my car. No one could have known about it unless they'd been close to us. And I'd left my car unlocked in the driveway. That night something, almost no stranger would guess. They had also known the timing. My parents gone. My brother gone. That wasn't random. I don't live there anymore, but my dad still brings it up sometimes. He's convinced whoever broke in was someone connected to the family. I'm not sure which possibility is worse, someone we know, or someone who somehow figured everything out. I won't claim that night changed my life forever, but I will say this. There's life before you believe you're about to die, and life after. I can still feel the carpet under my back, the weight on my chest, the moment I thought, this is it. It's like a scar you carry inside, even after the bruises fade. The events I'm about to tell you happened several months ago, but they still haunt me, and I can't shake the feeling that it was all carefully orchestrated, calculated, and deeply personal. I had just moved back to my hometown to be closer to my mother, who was growing older and dealing with some health problems. My new place, a small duplex, was ideal for my situation. It was just a few minutes away from her, so I could be there quickly in case anything went wrong. But it was also far enough that I could maintain my own space and independence, something I needed, especially in a time like this. My mom had been having health issues for a while. It wasn't life-threatening, but she had been falling around the house. Nothing major, just small slips here and there. She's always been stubborn, though, and refused to accept help. I'd been trying to convince her for a while to get one of those emergency alert systems, the ones that people wear around their necks, but she stubbornly dismissed the idea. She'd tell me I was being overprotective. But deep down, I knew something could happen, and I couldn't live with myself if I wasn't there when she needed help. It was a constant worry. She's alone most of the time, and I couldn't help but feel like something was bound to go wrong sooner or later. One evening, I was just settling in. It was around 8 p.m., and I was sitting on the couch, watching TV after a long day. My phone rang, and when I glanced at the caller ID, I saw a local number that I didn't recognize. I wasn't in the habit of answering unknown numbers, but something about the timing made me hesitate for a moment. Maybe it was important, I thought. So I picked up the woman on the other end, identified herself as a nurse at the local emergency room. My heart sank before she even got to the details. She said my mother had been admitted after a fall, and it hit her head. My mom was conscious but asking for me, and they wanted to know if I could come to the hospital right away. I didn't even have time to process what she was saying before I was on high alert. This was exactly the phone call I'd been dreading since moving back. I didn't question the legitimacy of the call. The nurse knew my mother's full name, her address, and even mentioned her recent hip replacement surgery, which had been done only a few months ago. It was all so specific. It felt real. The terror in my chest was overwhelming. Without thinking, I dropped everything. I didn't lock up the house or double-check anything. I just grabbed my car keys, slammed the door behind me, and rushed the car. My mind was racing as I drove. What if something happened to her? What if it was serious? The drive to the hospital was agonizingly long. I kept running different scenarios in my mind, but most of them didn't end well. When I arrived at the EA, I rushed to the reception desk, out of breath and panicked. I told them I was there for my mother and gave them her name, explaining I had just gotten a call about her fall. The nurse behind the desk looked at me with a puzzled expression. She typed into the computer, checked the records again, and then told me there was no record of anyone by that name being admitted that night. I was stunned. I was sure this was some kind of mistake. The phone call had been so convincing. I insisted that there had to be some error. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. The receptionist remained calm and assured me that there was no such record. She suggested that I try calling my mom directly to check if she was okay. I was too shaken to think straight, but I stepped outside and dialed my mom's number. She answered grudgingly, sounding like she had just woken up. She asked why I was calling so late, and I quickly told her I was just checking in on her. She said she'd been sleeping and was fine. That's when the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been set up. Someone had deliberately fed me false information to get me out of the house. My blood went cold, and I was overcome with a wave of fury and fear. How had they known so much about my mother? Why would they do this? I jumped back in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as I sped back home. When I pulled into the driveway, the front door was still closed, just as I had left it. For a moment, I thought maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I was being paranoid. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. My house had been completely ransacked. My TV was gone. My laptop was missing, and my small jewelry collection from the bedroom had been stolen. But what really disturbed me were the things they had taken that didn't make sense. Family photos were missing, removed from their frames, but left behind. Just the photos, not the frames. It was as if they wanted to take something that had emotional value rather than anything of financial worth. They'd even emptied my prescription bottles from the bathroom. It was unsettling, to say the least. I immediately called the police, but deep down, I knew it was too late. The thieves had already gotten away. I explained everything to the officers, recounting the details of the phone call verbatim. They listened carefully and agreed with my conclusion. Whoever had made that call knew personal details about me and my mother that no stranger could have. They didn't have any record of the call in their system, and I couldn't think of anyone who might have had access to that kind of information. The officers told me to report back if anything else came up. But by that point, I felt defeated. The theft itself was bad enough. But the fact that they had taken things of sentimental value, family photos, medical prescriptions, was even worse. It was as if they were planning something longer term, something more sinister than just a quick burglary. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were after something more than just cash. My first thought was identity theft. They might have been gathering personal details for a scheme. But nothing else happened for weeks. Even though my mother couldn't remember who she might have spoken to about her personal information, I had a sinking feeling that she was the source of the leak. She talks to so many people, and knowing her, she probably let something slip to the wrong person. I warned her to be more careful with whom she shared details, and thankfully she agreed. But no matter how careful we are, the nagging feeling remains. We're still being watched. Someone out there knows too much about us, and I don't think they're finished with whatever they're planning. As a precaution, I recently installed a Ring camera outside my house, hoping it will act as a deterrent. But I can't shake the anxiety. If anything else happens, I'll be sure to update. I'm a single guy in my early 30s, and I've been living alone in a small rented house for over a year now. It's a modest place, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing extravagant, but it's comfortable and affordable. Over time, it had become my sanctuary, a place where I could relax, unwind, and truly feel at home. That is, until one Thursday night. Everything changed. It was late, and I was getting ready to head to bed when I suddenly heard a loud, aggressive pounding on my front door. This wasn't just knocking. It was violent, like someone was trying to break it down. My heart raced, but I didn't panic. I'm a pretty big guy, so I wasn't scared, just irritated and confused. I peered through the window, but the porch light made it hard to see anything. Despite not being able to identify who it was, I opened the door, keeping the screen door between us as an extra layer of protection. What stood before me was a man who looked to be a few years older than me. He was disheveled, his hair wild, clothes wrinkled as if he'd been wearing them for days. He appeared completely out of his mind. His eyes darted around in every direction, and he was breathing heavily, like someone in the middle of a panic attack. He kept pacing back and forth, clearly agitated and unable to stand still. Before I could say a word, he began yelling, claiming that this was his house and demanding that I leave immediately. He called me a trespasser, threatening to call the police if I didn't get out. I thought he might be on drugs or dealing with some mental health crisis, but his behavior was erratic enough that I wasn't sure. Trying to remain calm, I explained that he had the wrong house. But the more I spoke, the angrier he became. Then, something truly unsettling happened. He started listing details about the house, things I hadn't told anyone. Details that only someone who had lived here would know. For example, he described how the master bedroom door doesn't close properly and how it bangs into the toilet. He also knew that the back door sticks and requires a slight lift while turning the handle to open it. There were more details, but I was too stunned to remember them all. I just stood there, frozen in place, unsure of what to think. Then, things got even stranger. He pulled a folder from his jacket and started showing me documents. First, there was a lease agreement, his name on it, dated months before I moved in. He even had pieces of mail addressed to him at this address. It all looked legitimate, though I suspected it had been forged. But the real kicker came when he pulled out his phone and showed me pictures. The photos were shocking. They weren't just random images. They were photos of him inside my house. He was sitting on my couch, cooking in my kitchen, even lying down in what was now my bedroom. The pictures looked recent, completely authentic. There was no sign they had been staged. And what made them even stranger was that some of them included other people I had never seen before. One picture in particular caught my eye. It was a selfie, taken by a woman I didn't recognize. In it, the man, the woman, and a few other people were gathered around my kitchen table, all smiling at the camera. A box of fireworks sat off to the side, and the photo's context seemed entirely genuine. The date on the picture was from this past 4th of July, just a few months ago. This didn't make sense. I knew for a fact I had been home on the 4th of July, So how could this man be in my house, smiling with people I'd never met? At that moment, I started questioning everything. Had I somehow blocked out memories of living with someone else in this house? Was I losing my mind? The photos, the documents, everything felt so real, yet so impossible. I needed answers. I told him I was calling the police to sort things out. It wasn't confrontational, just a calm decision to get some clarity. But the moment I mentioned the cops, his demeanor shifted drastically. He suddenly became calm and collected. He told me he'd wait outside while I made the call, and turned and disappeared into the night. I watched from the window, but couldn't see where he went. When the police arrived, I explained everything. They listened, but their response was lackluster. They suggested I reach out to my landlord and try to contact the previous tenants to get more information. I had all the documentation proving I rented the house, but when I offered to show it to them, they waved it off. They said it was likely a mental episode, and as long as the man was gone, I should move on. But that didn't sit right with me. I couldn't stop thinking about the evidence. How did he have all that information? How could someone have legitimate photos of my house if they'd never lived here? I contacted my landlord, who was just as confused as I was. He had no idea who the man was or how he could have that level of knowledge about the house. I eventually managed to contact the previous tenants. They said they had lived in the house alone for years and didn't know anyone matching the man's description. They were just as baffled as I was about how this stranger could know so much. For the next few weeks, I tried to push it out of my mind, but nothing felt normal. The tension was unbearable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then, one night, I came home from a night out with friends to find my house completely ransacked. It wasn't a typical robbery. The place wasn't just messy. It was as though someone had been looking for something specific. But nothing of value was taken. Most of my electronics were still in place, untouched.